Hello, welcome to this new tutorial. Today we are going to talk about the sketch of Geralt of Rivia I've done recently, and I will show and explain the most important decisions I've made before, and we will talk about the process later. So this is the result, this is the reference, but before we look into the process, let's talk about the reference and what to look for and what I consider to be important when I choose the reference or when I have to work from, let's say, low quality, low resolution reference images. So this particular screenshot, which I really like, this scene, this episode, it looked quite promising, but at the same time, everything is very foggy. I don't see clear edges, and the information, let's say, especially in the shadows, almost lost. So first, I focused on the 3-value range. So I've made decision to disregard the secondary figure and focus on the main character only, because the cloak, the costume, provides such a nice silhouette. So we can just put it next to the light background, and we already have some sort of graphic composition here. This background is going to be my lightest value group, and the costume and the shadows, they are darker group of values, so I'm just covering it, and it makes the light in the face my lightest group of values. So if I want to simplify, I will just make it this way. And you see these figures here, they are quite symmetrical along the center line, and I can start to build the illusion of the planes of the head, just focusing on this simple structure. So once again, I will even make it this way. I have the lightest group of values in the background and probably the top plane of the nose. The darkest is everything about costume and the shadows inside, and the mid group of values is the skin. Another thing to consider is we don't have strong cast shadows here, because we obviously deal with soft light. And when I paint, when I work using such references, I try to imagine if light was less soft, if, let's say, light was more direct spotlight. So I will say that the cast shadow is here. Another cast shadow is probably this one. I will take the red just to show you. You see, this is the shadow, the cloak, the hood is casting upon the forehead. This one is core shadow, yeah, like this one, core and cast shadows. So we can try to another cast shadow, sorry, and yeah, this one. So for the sake of better picture, for the sake of better representation, we could deliberately make the cast shadows slightly sharper and the soft and the core shadows softer. So we will have this stronger illusion of the form in this case. It is what I consider, and it is what I'm thinking about. And to see it clearly, I have to squint. So I will show you what I see when I squint approximately. We can open the curves, and let's say we crank up the values in the mid group, probably even more in the lightest group. Yeah, something like that. And maybe, yes, just shadows slightly darker. The half tones, we can leave them as they are, and slightly lighter, the lighter group of values. Now it looks, the contrast is better, and we have a really nice situation when this plane, the top plane of the nose, or like group of planes, is lightest, and the rest of the planes, even despite they are facing the light source, they are darker because due to soft light, we have like very diffuse situation everywhere. So I will focus on this lightest plane, and I will keep it this way. So yeah, it looks way more promising than before, you see. The next step would be the color, because the color is very too blue and desaturated. So I will open the camera raw filter. There are many ways of dealing with it, with colors. My favorite is this one, so I can just, I will show you, I can just change the temperature, the tint, to make it warmer, even like that. It looks way more natural now. Still the information is rather lost, but if we have value, yeah, maybe vibrancy and saturation, yeah. The most important for me is to have the values and I see them clearly. So let's say it is okay, and this is my reference prepared. You see, I am already using the dimensions of panel which I'm going to use for this painting. It is very helpful when you can clearly see the placement of the elements on the panel. So I highly recommend to crop the image you're using as your reference, to crop it the same dimensions as your canvas. It will save a lot of time and frustration when you just can transfer it visually and compare it. It is very important. So let's jump into the painting process. So I squint to the state when I see just a dark silhouette on the light background, and I focus on this silhouette first. And this silhouette is very easy shape, just kind of a triangular trapeze looking shape. And I see the negative space because the file, my reference image already provides proportions of the canvas. So quickly I can just throw in some lines, and I start to feel the shadow shapes right away. And at the same time, I am placing the most prominent dark shapes of the face, the eye sockets, and the bottom planes of the nose. I try to soften the edges where I see that they are going to be the core shadow to indicate the form, but the rest is just an indication now. So I feel everything with a sort of a dark brown mixture, but in this case, the whole image, the whole reference set is a slightly green-blue, has slightly green-blue tint. So I've decided to go this way. All my shadow mixtures, they have a certain amount of blue primary in it. And let's quickly talk about palette. What do I have? I have King's Blue, Titanium White, Yellow Brown, Transparent Red Oxide, Sinelia Red, Alizarin Crimson, raw amber, cerulean blue, ivory black, and terry verte. And I've added cerulean because of this green looking reference. So when I choose my pigments, in this case, it's all about the values as we discussed just before. So there is no point to use a lot of different pigments on the first day. So the first stage, I've decided to spend the whole time on building illusion of the form tonally using value and temperature shifts. So I use, for this sketch, since we have masculine personality here, a lot of angles, corners, straight lines. So as you can see, I'm using long, flat ivory brushes from Rosemary. And you also can see how I'm using the Q-tips here, because I can erase using Q-tip, but I also can create some sort of hatches in the shadows just to alter the value this way, but also to create interesting texture. I use more red primary in the shadow shapes of the nose, since we know that the nose and cheeks, they are going to have some red primary, so why not to use it right away? And now I'm focused mostly on the proportions, so relationships of big shapes of lights and darks in the face. And I try to use not just pigments, but also like anything which can help me to erase. It can be dry brush, it can be Q-tip, it can be just folded tissue or kitchen towel. And now when I have the relationships more or less established, I jump in with the skin tones and with the shadows as well. I deliberately make skin tones look slightly cooler in the lights, because this information we are actually missing on the reference. All skin tones, they look the same, but we know from experience that every time value is changing, the color or temperature should also change. So I keep the shadows warm. Traditional half tones are, every time I have to look for them, because they can be red or yellow or green or even blue sometimes. But the skin tone in the light should be just slightly cooler and desaturated compared to transitional halftone. One of the greatest shortcuts for such mixture is to mix transparent red oxide, titanium white, and King's blue. Like you can see it now on the palette, the top left mixture, top left pile. And slightly altering this mixture using more red or more yellow or more blue primary, you can alter your skin tones without drastic changes. The point is to paint all the shapes, all the planes slightly different with value and texture, and color, but steps should be very soft and gentle. So we don't really need high contrast, nor in value nor in color in the skin tones in the light. But nonetheless, it will be very visible in the outcome, the different colors. So I continue to build the illusion. I go darker now in the shadows. I indicate the eyes, or at least my understanding of the eyes where they should be. Anyways, I prefer squinting. So for me, the squinting is more important than close-ups, for example. I could just invent details or small shapes but I constantly keep myself squinting at the reference to see bigger picture, to see the relationships between the big value groups. Continuation of the building of the form. So for this painting, I found the just small long flat brush is the best. It helps me to keep straight lines and angular shapes of the planes of the head. Now I try to bring more paint into the light areas. So the idea is just to mix thicker and to apply thicker in the light. It will help to create an illusion without changing value too much. So as you can see, I am working mostly in the center of the image now, in the focal point in the face, because sometimes you don't know how much time left in your session, and probably you will finish before you will have time to paint the background or the costume. And I prefer to spend the first layer mostly on the face, and if I have time, I can just use it later to indicate unnecessary things. And another thing here is, since I know what is going on, how I will distribute the values, I know that the background is going to be lighter, so I keep it just a light value of the panel. It is okay. The only thing which I should keep in mind that the costume is going to be way darker. But I already established this, I already painted these darker values near the edge of the face, so I can compare all my values in the skin tones to these brush strokes. And I can just keep the value range intact, because most of the skin tones, most of the lights in the face are going to be my mid value range. I keep it in mind all the time. The brushes are getting smaller and sometimes softer. Probably you've noticed that I was using softer brushes just to make things smoother, to blend things together. And also when you paint on the panel, you can notice that there are some small little reflections, sort of glare coming in the shadow. So I'm using just soft brush, and I apply vertical strokes to eliminate this glare, this reflection. Okay, now I've added ultramarine blue to the palette, because it is time to fill in the darks. And I maintain the same logic for the cloth. Darks are slightly warmer. In this case, I'm just using alizarin crimson for the dark mixtures and a little bit of transparent red oxide. And the light planes of the costume, they are getting slightly cooler, because the light source, as I said before, light source is obviously cool. Technically, it is just a soft light of overcast sky. So I highly recommend to keep things simple at this stage, especially if you work using such references. Just, we need certain logic how light is changing value and how light is changing temperature, and we need clear distribution of the values, clear understanding of three value groups: dark, medium, and light. And if we can see clearly these three groups of values when we squint, we can reproduce it. We can just make the same on the canvas, which gives us just step-by-step process. So I believe that for successful painting, we have to solve the problems one by one, not trying to jump into everything at the same time. So you see, I don't paint the eyes, for example, or small details. I focus mostly on the big shapes, and now I try to blend things together using additional changes in values, representing smaller planes, subtle changes. Approach to color here, probably it is getting more and more visible. I try to make skin tones look more, let's say, orange or warm by using more blue in the surrounding shapes in the costume. So these two complementary colors, they work pretty well. So you don't really have to make your skin tones highly saturated. All you have to do sometimes is just to make the costume slightly bluer, or the background, so the skin tones will look warmer eventually. And now it's time to throw some pigment on the background to see how will it work all together. And thus we will have all three value ranges established. So darker in the shadows, using warmer mixtures. And for texture or for small details like hair, sometimes all you have to do is just to scrape things or use any kind of tools to create a texture. I found it very funny to use knives and other tools like cards for details or textural effects. Yeah, here you can see that I try to be very accurate. I proceed with caution because the eyes, I cannot see them clearly. So my idea here is just to, at this stage, in the first stage of painting, just to indicate the eyes, to align them accordingly on constructive line, which should be parallel to all the rest of constructive lines and perpendicular to the center line of the head. And I just continue the rendering, continue building up the form. From experience, I know that if I'm going to paint over later, like in the second stage, I would rather keep things thin and smooth. So I don't want to use a lot of pigment in the eyes at this moment, in the eye sockets. Just indication is enough. Again, soft brushes, small ones, but still the shape is long, flat. So the whole painting is done just using different long flats. Mostly ivories, but this one is Eclipse, which is just slightly softer. So with the background mixture, I can fix mistakes of the silhouette if I need to enforce the proper silhouette, proper contour of the figure, and also to introduce certain sharp edges. I try to use sharp edges. Even if I don't see them, I try to find the opportunity to use sharp edge because we need some variety in edges. We need variety in textures, we need variety in colors, we need variety in shapes, and we can add variety in edges to make our picture look more interesting. So technically, I think the Alla Prima stage, the first layer, is almost done at this point. I'm focused mostly now on the relationships. The main relationships of the value groups and the relationships of the shapes inside of the, like, in the face. Because I believe we can afford to make small minor mistakes, especially with the smaller planes, but we have to be very, very accurate and focused on the big relationships, on the bigger things. So it is always working from general to specific, this method, on different levels, starting with shape design, distribution of the values, simplification and grouping the values, using simplified colors, like right now I'm using like kind of limited palette, and just expanding things, expanding palette later, bringing more brushes, using different methods in rendering and focusing on the smaller, more specific shapes and changes. Because if we try to tackle all at once, it's very difficult. So I recommend you to paint bigger shapes, use less pigments on the palette, and focus on general things first and continue later. I believe there is no goal to finish painting in one sitting. Sometimes we can do it, but sometimes it is better to leave panel to dry and to continue next day or a few days later when the surface is totally dry. And I think this is it for this first stage. I just try to make some adjustments now to indicate the outline in the nose. And it's pretty much it. So thank you so much for watching. If you like to paint along, just check the real-time version of this painting and try to follow the same steps and same approach. I'm sure it will help you to improve your painting skills. So until next time, bye.